Welcome to episode 15 of Quadocast, entitled Roz's Restaurant.
You can get anything you want at Roz's Restaurant.
We have an ownership problem here at the Quadomain, especially when it comes to our leadership. Board members incapable of owning their mistakes. A sign of a good leader is one who owns it and moves on, or in the case of a mistake so large, owns it and steps down. I will buy a cup of coffee to the first neighbor who writes in recounting a moment in time where any board member in recent history who's ever served ever admitted to anything, to even the smallest of mistakes at this point. If I had $1 for every apology that is owed to this association, would be enough to buy a unit here. If you want better governance, do not vote for anyone running for the board who owes this community an apology. Whether it was Mark from Catania for defying the will of the rec board, or Lewis from Britannia selling out to Mark, along with a countless number of other blunders, or Janelle from Valencia, who failed to apologize for much more than a mistake, and much more than a lie when she abused her position to manipulate information and deceive the committee by pretending to be the voice of the office when in fact the office was unaware of her actions. It's an abuse of authority and a breach of trust, and it's frankly unforgivable. One of her more public lies was at an open meeting over a year ago regarding the restaurant, when one of the unit owners reminded the board that they never voted for the restaurant, or at least not in any open meeting, and she turned around and lied to all of us saying, yes, we did. We voted for it. This took place in the early days before things went bad with the restaurant. And after things went bad, months later, she had the nerve, in an open meeting, as an attempt to distance herself from it, she voted against having the restaurant. What vote? What meeting is she talking about? She seems to live in a world of fiction, delusion, and lies. So she's telling us all about a fictional vote that never took place, and then telling us which way she voted for that fictional vote. So what does she mean by that vote? Could it have happened? Was there a secret meeting? I'm betting not, because something of that magnitude would have come out. Maybe it's an informal straw poll that, however board members communicate with messaging apps and the like, for sentiment or a feeling of where they stand on an issue? More likely, but still speculation. No idea. But let's get back to what's on the main menu, the ownership of this restaurant. Who owns this fiasco?
You can get anything you want at Roz's Restaurant.
Lewis, Janelle, and Roz are each running for re-election, and they boast and borderline exaggerate so many achievements, but when you take a look at their bios, they have something in common. All three of them are silent and don't say a word about the restaurant. And what a coincidence that Lewis, Janelle, and Roz are also the legal committee for rec, so they have plenty of cover to have to keep it quiet since there's ongoing litigation. In fact, talking about the restaurant has become near taboo. I bet you all three of them, if they could talk, would be racing to be first to say Marlene owns it because she signed the contract. But now there are plenty enough court documents in the public to have a better idea who really was the driving force behind this deal. And we'll get to that in a moment. But despite the bad judgment, decision-making, or negotiations still unknown to this day, the one fishy that's getting away in this story is the former rec lawyer. I find it hard to believe an attorney practicing for decades would have allowed that modified lease agreement to be signed. I bring this up because there is a lot of evidence of plenty of attorneys across plenty of associations giving us so-so work at best. Take the addendum to the settlement agreement. We had at least 3 different sets of lawyers' eyes on it, and they all agreed to wording that had so many obvious flaws to it. Makes you question all of them. I bring this up because one of the most important distinctions in this election are the candidates, where most incumbents have publicly said it's not their business to read the contracts. That's the job of the lawyers. Whereas most of the challengers are saying the opposite, that it's important to read the contracts, to ask better questions, to hold the lawyers to more accountability, especially with the level of service we've been getting from them lately. I believe in my heart of hearts, any rookie lawyer on the planet looking at that modified lease agreement with the restaurant would have stopped it dead in its tracks. With that said, let's take a closer look at what is now publicly available in the Broward County court system as public record. Want to offer some context to the following screenshots. They are from the points of view of the plaintiff and defendant, that I guess they're still in the realm of allegation or their witness testimony. The point is the following information is not conclusive of anything, but at the same time, those who've provided testimony were under oath, so it's probably a pretty close approximation to truth as they experienced it. In court testimony on May 24th of last year, our lawyer was questioning Raj, the tenant and manager of the restaurant, when he answered, "We came to sell them," meaning Quadocast, an event for the end of the year. When we were sitting down in the office and walking around the property, which was part of the due diligence, it was Roz. It was her idea to show us the restaurant. He continued by saying she knew very well that we did events, and that's the reason we were on the property, and she showed us the restaurant.
Walk right in, it's around the back, just a few miles from the railroad track.
And that's what sparked my interest. So it was. They knew exactly who we were, what business we work in, and why we're here. And to show us that, and there are many, many text messages right in the beginning that say, can we get into the social hall? Can we do this? And everything was approved up front. There was no denial at all. A footnote here, these so-called text messages, if they exist, are still private and not, to my knowledge, revealed in documents that I'm aware of as of yet. In further testimony, it's revealed about the origins of the original lease, which says, this is the document that we requested from Roz. What's the date on it? November 13th? This is the document we requested in word from Roz right in the beginning before we started set up to do the lease. For reference, the search for a restaurant started in August, and there were some checks and balances in place. The rec board was trying to do the same thing. They had different vendors submit menus that we got to look at and went through a process, but that all finally fell through by early November. So this thing is like, within 7 to 10 days, all of a sudden, we are in the new territory in the current situation we find ourselves in. Getting back to one last point in that May 24th testimony, a little further on the timeline, roughly mid-January, on opening day, the question to the tenant was, the president of the association present on opening day? Yes, she was. That means Marlem at the time. Okay, did they see you serving members? And Roz, also the VP, was present many times during the day, in and out. Did they see you serving members of the general public on that day? Absolutely. Here's an example of how this might not be conclusive. Though that's the tenant's point of view, how would anyone know for sure it was someone from the public and not just a private celebration for us? Now we're going to take a look at witness testimony August 9th of last year. Again, the tenant being asked the question, what did she tell you about the lease when you first were speaking with her? Her meaning Roz. The answer, well, she said, she walked me over to the restaurant and she says, how would you like to have a restaurant here? This is a restaurant that was shut down and dilapidated. And I said, I don't think I could afford your terms. She says, well, I could make them really favorable for you and it'll be rent-free. Again, this is a tenant's point of view, but what seems more and more clear that Roz was the front person and main lead person in this deal. More and more, it looks like she's starting to own this deal. It's turning into Roz's restaurant.
Can get anything you want. Roz's restaurant.
Further in the testimony, getting back to the original lease that was sent to the tenant. Question, okay, within paragraph 4 of that lease, does it permit you to serve members of the general public? No. Does it permit you to use the common areas for events? No. The tenant was then asked, those were the terms specifically negotiated by you and included in the final lease, correct? Yes, correct. So after you signed the final lease, adding your terms, your special terms, members of the general public and ability to use the common areas, the tenant is recounting in his experience of receiving the original lease in a Word document that can be edited and obviously sent back and forth between entities, whether it's lawyers or directly to board members or both, we don't know. Moving on, later that month, August 27th of 24, there was a filing with a paragraph stating, more importantly, however, on or about January 24, Roz, then vice president of the association, told the tenant about renovation contributions due under the lease for January and February would be deferred, such that 24 monthly payments would begin when QRA sends the first invoice for tenant. Did she have the right to solely defer? Was the board voting on it, or at least had knowledge? Also in paragraph 132 of that filing, saying, Roz on behalf of the landlord told tenant that the breezeway was within the restaurant space, and landlord confirmed this by supplying the tables and chairs for the breezeway area and allowing the tenant to operate in the daily restaurant business and host events in the breezeway for months. The next paragraph, the tenant's making the case, there's nothing that informs the party of what 2,700 square feet restaurant space is and whether it includes the breezeway area. Only the landlord's representation that the breezeway is included within the restaurant space. Again, this is an assertion from the tenant and not yet any kind of provable fact in the realm of hearsay. for now. Combing through these documents so far, there is very little mention, if at all, of the tenants interfacing with Marlem or other board members. The single board member that had the most interfacing with the tenant is Roz. This is not revelatory news. We had a general understanding of an involvement, but unclear how deep and close and important, especially on the front end of this deal, was that the nature of that involvement. That's why this is Roz's restaurant.
You can get anything you want. Roz's restaurant.
It's her baby. Instead of Rosemary's baby, it's more like Rosemary's baby. I have a lot of respect for Roz as a neighbor and believe she's trying to do what she thinks is good for the community. But along with leadership comes its associated risks and consequences. So despite the different ways she has helped this community, I cannot endorse her for this election cycle. Remember, in 1 year's time, there would be an opportunity to run again. And I say that with all due respect because there are other board members that have no business ever running again. On the subject of other candidates I cannot endorse at this time at QCA are all candidates that did not submit a bio. And in this election cycle in Valencia, there are two people who have not done so. Henry Rumi and Yefim Portnov, I could not endorse and don't believe anyone should vote for them because of that. In my view, not submitting a bio means you're not serious about being a candidate, period. Getting back to Roz's restaurant.
You can get anything you want. Roz's restaurant.
There was a new submittal of documents just days ago which merits a look at. The tenant amended their complaint with the court to claim tortious interference against Lewis in an individual capacity. It reads that Lewis had engaged in bad faith conduct amounting to a tortious interference on Lewis's part in his individual capacity with the tenant's business relations. They are going after him individually rather than as a representative of the association. Document cites a meeting that took place a little less than a month ago on January 6th. Oh, great, Jan 6, right? Where the tenant, who handles day-to-day business affairs, was meeting with a prospective customer who wanted to host her baby shower at Roz's restaurant.
You can get anything you want. Roz's restaurant.
Oh, I mean the tenant's restaurant. The amendment further states that while tenant may arguably not be permitted to operate its restaurant on Mondays, it certainly is permitted to occupy the leased premises for other reasons. On Monday, Jan 6th, while the restaurant was closed for the day and not operating, the tenant sat with the prospect to discuss her baby shower plans. It then goes on to read that Lewis, with an association security guard by his side, ambushed the tenant's meeting with the prospect. Again, that is the tenant account, and we don't know the other side of the story, and these are just assertions or claimed allegations. It then goes on to read that Lewis yelled at the tenant in front of the prospect and her small child, shouting that the tenant's not allowed to be on the premises at all on Mondays. Lewis used swear words, actually scared the small child, who could be seen clinging onto his mother. And lastly, in the complaint, it states that Lewis's decision to directly interfere with the tenant's business relationship with the prospect was one made in bad faith, and the manner in which he conducted himself in that unnecessary confrontation, as well as the words he chose to shout in front of a customer and her small child, was morally reprehensible. Lewis's conduct actually caused the prospect to choose not to do business with the tenant, and we just publicly learned of this like 3 or 4 days ago. Again, that is only one side of the story. We don't know what happened. And don't get me wrong, I could understand the bad hair day, and I imagine having to keep a lot of this tight-lipped throughout the year can cause a lot of pressure and stress, particularly with this entire community having to live with the most bizarre, surreal, persistent, unwanted circumstance in our community. But I guess that's just one of the things you could get at Roz's restaurant.
You can get anything you want. Roz's restaurant.
Dress rehearsal is over, people. There is plenty of new blood challengers on the sidelines, head-down workhorse business process type who want to read every word of contract to choose from this year. For the very incumbents who think they don't have to read contracts, leave us all at the risk and mercy of how good they are at picking our association attorney. The one thing I know hands down for sure is that these challengers, who are the business, process, diligent contract reading types who care about how things get done, would be the ones best qualified to find better lawyers than most of the incumbents who still think Marlem did a great job, because they share the common trait of not caring how things get done. The ones who openly brag like a badge of honor why they're entitled not to read a contract. It's selfish, ignorant, and as representatives puts us all at higher risk. It is both an unnecessary and avoidable gamble, because by definition, if we actually did have had a good rec attorney at the time, none of this would have happened, no matter how ignorant our board members were. We need guardrails, people, and there needs to be consequences, especially to those who won't own a damn thing. On that note, I'm wishing everyone a great day ahead.
You can get anything you want at Rise's Restaurants. You can get anything you want at Rise's Restaurant. Just walk right in, it's around the back, just a few miles from the railroad tracks. You can get anything you want at Rise's Restaurant.